Welcome to the Strength Coach Experience podcast. I'm your host, Joe Lego, and here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Strength Coach Experience, episode 33. I can't believe we're at 33 already. Today, I want to welcome Quin Sandler, who is the CEO of Plantiga, all the way out there in Vancouver. Quin, thanks for being on the show. I'm really excited to talk about this technology and what your company's doing, and thanks for being on.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. So why don't we just, we'll start off for all the listeners. Why don't you go into a little bit about what is your company, what you guys do, and kind of the artificial intelligence monitoring that you guys are into?
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So essentially what we are building is what we call human movement intelligence. We have developed, I should show you, very powerful IMU-based sensors that kind of slip inside an insole. And we measure movement with precision. So kind of what we've been able to get inside of a lab with force plates and motion capture and timing gates, we actually pull down into our system. So speed, ground contact time, flight time, RSI, jump height, and a variety of other metrics. That basically is kind of step one. Step two is we do a bunch of data science and machine learning on top of that to really drive some predictions around performance, around recovery, around rehab, and around injuries. So we kind of have this platform of the hardware, but I think some of the really most exciting stuff that we do is in kind of the software analytics data science group. And our CTO was with Tableau. So we're very much rooted in data visualization, data processing, but not just data. It's translating that data into actually something that somebody can do something with, because data for the sake of data is useless. So that's kind of what we're about.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Data for the use of data is useless. We can bring up baseball. They have all these wonderful analytics, but if you broke down most of them, they don't matter. X velo is great, but all that matters is if the ball goes over the fence. So if you get the ball at 75 miles an hour and it goes over the fence, that is just enough to get over there, right? I mean, it's great to, look at this guy. He's got, 150 X velo and blah, 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 but it doesn't really matter, and I'm sure as we get involved, and you can tell the more power output somebody has, or a lot of forces that people have, we can create more injuries, right? Or there could be more issues because the more force we have, the more stuff we have to deal with. And I think that's something that you guys are going to bring out, or bringing out and talking about, but something that's kind of lost because we're still in that more power, right? You build a race car, bigger engine, more gas, more explosions, instead of saying, well, if the ball can get over the fence and they do it consistently and they're healthy,
all that matters.
They're strong enough, but if they, if we get 200 mile an hour exit velos, but they're all hurt and they can't play 5 games, I don't think it really matters.
Totally. Same thing with like combine style testing. Like I still find it so funny that like they'll do aspects of the NBA or NFL or combine testing, like somehow that matters your 40 time. It should really be what was the distance to hit your top speed? Who cares about a 40? Like you might never run that. So I cannot agree. I feel like the way that we assess right now, especially in performance, is a little bit old school. And I think over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to see that update a ton. Because it doesn't matter to exit velo. Like, do you hit the ball over the fence? Like what's your batting average? Like these things, like what we could, like the outputs that actually matter. So I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I talked about it in another podcast. I think a lot of these tests are just because the people that run everything, it's safe. Okay, what's a combo? Oh, you bench press 225, you run a 40. We do the pro agility. They're easy. They don't have to change. Because I think if somebody like you comes in there and they say, okay, we're going to test how long it takes them to get to peak power. How long does it take to get to top speed, right? How many of those reps were faster than 0.8 to 1.2 meters per second? Not how many you can do. And then I think we honed up down a whole nother rabbit hole, and we're going to replace, a changing of the guard. And I think I'm not speculating and I'm not calling out the test, although I do think the tests are nonsense, especially in baseball. But
Lots of them are, for sure.
That's the issue. It's a thing within a thing. It's its own thing. The NFL Combine, I mean, they have performance places that solely train for that. So I think that, and again, this is just speculating, but it requires more work. The more we change, the more we get better at these things. And it's easier to just say, well, we're just going to get him to bench press 30 times at 225 and run a 40 and everything else, right? Same thing with baseball. We run a 60.
Totally.
Unless you're an outfielder and the center fielder and the left fielder die and you have to go get the ball, we're not running 60 yards.
No.
But we
also too, I think we're in early innings, to use a baseball. Like, I feel like we're in like the first or second inning when it comes to performance, science, sports med. Like, we really very rarely know what's happening with the actual body, what aspects somebody has that will determine, like, even in drafting, right? Lots of times the people that go in the top 10 are not the eventual people that outperform. So why is that? All the money getting dumped in across every league, like, it's still really hard to determine who's going to do well in their respective sport 3 or 4 years in, right?
Yep.
We don't know what correlates quite yet. We have a good idea, but not really.
Yep. And I think that's an interesting point. I love that Tom Brady's going to play to his 100, and I love how he keeps winning because
199, he was the 199th draft pick.
Yep. He continuously throws that in the face. And the interesting thing is that nobody's talked about yet is that if you take the people that are successful, right, in all sports, they will hit on all these tests we talk about. If you took LeBron James and ran him through the force production ringer and cardio output and all the analytical things that are important in basketball, he would have blown it out of the water. Same thing with, Michael Jordan. Now, mindset is a huge thing that separates them too. And I'm a Michael Jordan guy. Will always
love
be.
Michael Jordan. He's my
but
favorite.
Also, if you took him and you gave him those tests, same thing with Kobe, rest in peace.
Yeah.
They would have scored high. Same thing with Tom Brady, because a quarterback doesn't need to be fast. But if you would have tested football IQ, ability to get the ball out, footwork,
visual,
balance, he would have scored higher, and he would have been your number one pick. But if you look at him with his shirt off and you try to make him run a 40, he's not exactly what you want. But I think those are the things that need to be looked at. Is that all these guys, Mike Trout, if you would have took him and put him through an analytical combine, which is what I think needs to happen, he would have done well regardless. So I think that's an underwhelming thing. Well, but you do have these guys, your Trouts, your Bradys, your LeBrons. But I think if you tested them in a better way through analytics, I think they would have been better in the analytical stuff than just the random things we put them through now.
That's a good point. And even back then too, like, we didn't do that testing, like, that testing is relatively new. So yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, no, I just come back to, we are early days with understanding what, even like change of direction, like, how do we measure it, right? Do we measure it like from the time that you actually stop and then move? Like, is it like right versus left? Is it cutting right and forward? And like that pro agility, it's not really the time. It should be like, how quick am I going from right to left and left to right? But just like timing me doing that circuit is somewhat useless. Like, it's not useless, but it doesn't really dive deeper. It's surface level.
Yeah, and it doesn't take an account of the how, because the how's what matters.
Totally.
Right? I mean, I know lots of people, they're
What's
fast,
your loading strategy? Yeah,
yep, exactly.
Totally.
How did you get from there to there? Right?
Totally.
Because if you did it faster than me, but I move less efficiently, if I produce more power than you, I put less stress on my body, and I was able to move better when something else happened, then I win, even though your time is faster, right?
Right?
I think we do a bad job in general of, we like to pick one variable. It's very easy to say a heavy deadlift creates velo. A heavy deadlift is better for the 40, instead of saying, well, but how, like we talked about before, how fast is this 40?
Totally.
How many steps did it take him to get to 22 miles an hour? Right?
That's the thing. Like, how fast did it take him to get there? Who cares what the 40 or 50 or 60 was?
Exactly. Because if you can run if it takes you to the end of your 40 to get to top speed, and you're able to do that in a game, you've already broke through the tackle. You're
a wide receiver. Exactly.
The hole is open. If you can get to top speed in 4 steps, that's what I want in the backfield when I'm running.
Yeah.
If you're at top speed at 30 yards running a 40, you're already gone.
Totally. Totally.
So why don't we jump into, so just go over your background a little bit, growing up and, athletics and things like that. And then we'll kind of get into how you got involved in all this stuff and how you created
Cool.
this.
So background was, I've always played tons of sports. So basketball, baseball, football, played, summer rep leagues. Sport has always been a part of my life. I've come to realize that a lot of my ability, even in business, comes back to sport. Teaches you to win. It teaches you that you can do everything in your power to win. And if you lose, that's okay, but at least you gave it your all. That kind of like mindset of like trying to outperform yourself, get better, and just to compete, like what it feels like to win. And I think, I have a young child at just a year and a bit, but like sport to me is everything. And it's everything for heart and competition and, teaches just values that I hold dear. So I played a ton of sport growing up. I feel like I'm very fortunate to work in that world now, whether it's on like the strength coach performance side or teams. So, sport, to me, sport is everything. And it's more than sport. Like, I feel like everyone's an athlete. You could be 75 years old and be an athlete because you're trying to perform and just fend off Parkinson's. Like, anybody can be an athlete. I don't buy it that you need to be playing a sport. An athlete to me is like an athletic mindset. So I feel like that's kind of what sport taught me. And we turn around and talk a lot about, at Plantiga, how like everybody is an athlete. Everybody is. It's just the mindset.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When you're training, regardless if it's athletics or just a regular, with the general public, you have to look at it as, what do they want to do, right? And I think that's some of the, corporate gyms, they don't really grasp that, right? I've worked for all of them and nothing against them, but it's, if I have an older woman who's 70 years old, she comes to me, why? Well, because not that she wants to get in shape, she wants to get out of a chair better. She wants to reach.
Totally. She has goals.
Wants to walk faster. She wants to hold groceries. Like you said, those are still movements. So instead of,
pick up for grandchildren.
Everybody wants to generalize. It's not. It's okay. Out of these 20 movements of life, because once we get up there, what's most important to you? And I think that is a great point, and it's a direction. Everybody's athletic, because whether or not you're in a sport, you're still training to do something. Exactly.
Yeah.
As you get, like, I played sports and now I lift to look nice, but the point is it's so I can still do those things, and I think that is something that always has to be talked about. Not, we just do general fitness. Well, no, everybody has a goal. If you're 30 years old and you're a lawyer, why are you coming to me? Because you want to be able to stand on your feet, delegate, have
or
the
bench press, or be more
exactly.
confident or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. It's all as a thing. And I think that thing with sports, I wanted to dive into, because I've been talking about it. This whole idea of everybody gets a trophy and winning all the time and everybody's on a team. I've spoke about it before. I think it's a terrible idea, because you have to, as you said, sports
participation medals is the worst idea ever. You need to learn that you win. If you get second, you lose, and that's fine. Not everybody wins. Like, that's what life is. So it teaches you to be a good loser, essentially.
Exactly. Yep. And 100%. I was on, I just put up with Mike Borowitz, and he talks about what is the difference. Him and his son talked about it. To lose and be a loser, meaning anything you can lose, that's fine. But if you take it and you turn it into a positive, okay, I could have done this better, but I did this really good, you're not a loser. Right.
No,
and I think that's
you just lost.
Exactly. And the stuff is, that's why I have a problem with it. You take away the trophies. And like you said, sport is sport. Sport changes your life. Everybody thinks it's a game. Oh, yeah, no, if we take the soccer ball away, all the kids will be happy. No, it teaches you that as you grow up, everybody doesn't get a medal. Everybody doesn't get a trophy. And you have to, that's hierarchy. You have to work harder than the other person. Right. If we all just went to college and we all just got the same job, we'd be in that, what's that movie that Stanley Cooper, somebody directed? It's like, I forget what it's called.
Yeah, some futuristic
Orange or whatever, one of those older movies, but it's all Yeah, and it's just, like I said, I hate when they talk about that, because it's not that you're, a lot of the stuff we chip away at, it's not that it's good now. It's great for the 6-year-old that got cut because now he's happy. But in 20 years, when a boss says, no, you're fired, or so-and-so's better than you, what are we going to do, right? And that causes this psychological stuff. And, we've been talking about that, scratch the surface. I love bringing it up because I talk about mindset a lot. I have my friend and teacher, Tony Ricci, talk about how like low on the boat we are with just in general mindset. We really know nothing about mindset and how it's kind of how we react, how it changes, how much it affects it. So I think, like I said, really good points with, you have to lose, you have to learn. And we are still in the infancy, like young incubator stage with lots of this stuff. I mean, in retrospect, we know nothing. I mean, if you
We
want to,
know nothing. And in fact, because we work in research, we conduct research, we're involved with universities around the world. What you realize is the more you dive into the literature for one is probably 2 years behind where things are now, which is kind of interesting because it's peer reviews, but that works like 18 months old or 2 years or 3 years. And then second is we just don't know much. Like we really do not know a lot. It could be ACLs, ankles, it could be tendinopathies. Like we're just starting to understand this is correlated to this, or quite frankly, what we thought isn't. And also too, for us, I'm in the world of return to play a bunch. Like the amount of people that don't use objective measures in deciding if an athlete should go back after an ACL is ridiculous. Like we work with a clinic, probably the premier clinic in Western Canada for ACLs. And when I asked them like what they did for objective measures, they said 0. We don't do any. Like you don't even take a measuring tape to do single leg jump for distance or for height. Like, are you kidding me? Well, like what is happening here? So in that sense, we're like in our infancy, not just with what we know, but even how we implement that data, how we make sense of it. Like people are still deciding things based on their eye, which is just crazy.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think again, it goes back to it's almost like if you talk about, we'll talk about psychology. I'll bring up Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
But he talks
Canadian.
about how, I love him to death.
Yeah, he's great.
If he talks about how, if you set a goal, right? And you say, by next Friday, I am going to lose 5 pounds at the gym, right? You go to the gym or you don't go to the gym. By next Friday, I can lose 5 pounds or not. It's right in front of your face.
Yeah.
But then if I pick something that's a little more, obtuse or not as clear cut, right? Not speaking what I mean.
Not a key result. You can't
exactly.
measure it.
I can let that marinate for 8 months. If I'm not clear cut in exactly what I'm doing, I can let that marinate for 8 months, 10 months. There's no ability to test. And the bandwidth is so long that by time, if ever I find out what I'm doing is actually working, nobody can say anything, or it's not enough time to teach me a lesson. So I think to bring that back to what you said, I think by having objectively stuff and saying, okay, he jumped 6 feet last week and now he's jumping 7, I have to sit down and say, okay, what I'm doing is working. Where
Totally.
if I want to look at you and say, oh, well, his Q angle looks great, have at it, that allows me to say, well, I thought, and I think, and I don't like to say that because it's terrible, but I think that's what happens. It's more of, you're not wanting, they don't want to be held to a standard because obviously if I were to do that, if you were to do that, I want to hook you up to a sensor. I want to see, okay, yes, he's stronger, but we got more activation from the quad. We had less pressure on the ACL. His LCL was good. The knee didn't track. We want to find that that's truly returning to play. Not
you can't change what you don't measure, right?
Exactly.
Right. If you don't measure it, how are you supposed to change it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think that's
right. Amen to that.
Yeah. So growing up playing sports, how did you get involved in this? How were you always interested in technology, or was it something that just kind of piggybacked off of sports? And
kind of, my story is a little bit unique and very family oriented. So I actually started Plantiga with my father. Almost like 10 to 12 years ago. It was a side project, kind of a side hustle. My dad had a background in biomechanics and product design. So I kind of came into it with him. I'm in university. I'm kind of probably actually was just after. Basically with the idea that ground reaction force, we're measuring the way that the foot interacts with the ground. If you could do that from within a shoe, that has blue sky opportunities. So whether it's, different diseases or sports or performance or seniors or health, like it's amazing to track that. So we kind of bumped along. My dad actually got very, very ill with prostate cancer and passed away 4 years ago. Oh, wow. So what's interesting about Plantiga is like, it's still very much in my dad's honor. And about 4 years ago, when my dad got sick and passed away, is actually right when our company started to kind of get our roots. And we got our first customers in the Mariners, and we kind of started our direction. So my father, Norman, lives on our patents and kind of very much, I now can kind of walk the talk like a sports scientist, and I interact with them every day. But really, I got through this world through my dad, which was his world, and my background was in graphic design and product. So very much around building, but not really around building with like human data, things like that. So that's kind of the background. And now we're a team of 15, and we're growing, and we're a bona fide business, making money out there in the world.
Yeah, no, that's a great story. Like I said, family owned, and the biomechanics background is great. I think that word needs to be pushed more and more. Like I said, I use it all the time, and it's more, you have to have that understanding, the biomechanics. And I think that's great. What the bottom of the foot can tell you is amazing. It's like a runner, you look at the bottom of their sneakers, the stuff can, if you can analyze that and those ground reaction forces, that's going to tell you whether you're going to get hurt or not. I mean, that's
100%.
It's almost like writing on the wall, right? It's not like it's almost right in your face and nobody's touched it for so long.
For us too, is like we look at spatial and temporal gait. So that's basically space and time, things like ground contact time and flight time, but also how the actual limbs are moving, like stride length variability, swing time variability. So we kind of really extract not just where the foot hits the ground, but kind of your like low back down. We really are like a magnifying glass, kind of like an MRI, where we can visualize the bottom half of the body's kinematics and then extract a whole whack of information and insights from that. So like we do this thing called the technique, it's called movement maps, but we basically visualize how the limbs move across the sagittal, coronal, all of these different planes, and you get a really good visual image of how those limbs move. So yeah, I feel like that part of the body and that kind of understanding you really only get in labs. And that's kind of a statement that I come from my dad, but the democratization of gait analytics. Historically, if you wanted to look at how you walk, ran, and even now, you have to go into a lab at a university. Even sports teams barely have them. So very few people have access to this amazing data set. Like it's so valuable. And our kind of driving goal was always, how can we take that and bring that to a much wider population? In fact, just regular people. Like how can we democratize that data? So that's kind of always what's driven us. And even when we started with me and my dad.
Yeah, no, I can see as you talk about it, that graphic design background really picks up, because when you start, the breakdown of the movement, you start putting those grids in, that's all about graphic design. It's the same, the same way you probably make a sphere on a paper is the same way that the body gets broken down within space to analyze the movements and the joint angles.
Totally, 100%. 100%.
And I think that's huge. It's an untapped resource, right? Because what have we done before, you guys? We test athletes. Well, they have the best gaits because they're made to do. That's what they do for a living.
They're unnatural to the regular population by definition because they're professional.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's that's always been a crazy. You see a commercial for Nike, they go through all this science, but I'm like, why are we testing them? Because we're just going to find out that they're really good at all this stuff, but
which we know
other people exactly. And I think that's the problem. It's always, we always test the upper echelons, right? It's always, I just got to talk to, I don't know if you've heard of Levels, they do the glucose.
Of course. Amazing.
Yeah, I just talked to them, and somebody yesterday was like, why would you do that? I'm like, why would I do that? It's amazing. They're going to analyze my blood sugar.
Your metabolic response to training to understand what your glucose is. Are you kidding me? You want to do that.
Yeah, but it's just, it's a thing where it's for some reason, stuff that you're doing, the Fitbit, it's always athletes first, and then it tapers down, and then now it goes on to, it should be the other way. If you're, no offense, but if you're severely out of shape and obese and you're not active, you should wear a Fitbit. So every morning it comes on and says, hey, yesterday you walked 50 feet, you burned 7 calories, you didn't sleep, and this is what happened. And your resting heart rate's terrible. LeBron James doesn't need to know what his resting heart rate is and how many steps he took. Just as a side note, we got Fitbits with the Mets. I gave mine away because the first day it said I walked 26,000 miles, 26,000
ridiculous.
steps.
Fitbits,
I'm like,
I
was like, I don't need this to tell me I'm active.
Even when I'm on a plane with my Apple Watch, it'll say you've done 10,000 steps. I'm like, no, I'm just on a plane. I'm not walking. Like it's actually super early days there. What's interesting about Levels, and I think what that company is doing is amazing, and I've met some of the people there. is if you look at them, they're looking at like metabolic fitness, right?
Mhm.
So blood glucose response to training. If you look at things like Gainful, we have personalized protein powders. We have Whoops, which basically is respiratory and heart rate. So it's like how I breathe and my heart.
Mhm.
Nothing on the market measures the biomechanics. How does somebody fucking move, right? Like,
Yep.
how are you moving? Because if we measure that, we can fend off a looming injury. We can really objectively track my ACL. Like, a big thing that I care about is if you look at the ACL rates between female athletes and male athletes, it's a travesty.
Yep.
Like, females are 6 times higher just because their hips put their
Yep.
knees in valgus. But again, like, why are we not tracking these people? Why are women at an alarming rate doing one ACL and then injuring their contralateral ACL? It's like, what is happening? So I feel like we very much want to kind of be a voice in that space, because again, you have the levels, the glucose. I can get genetic testing, I can get all sorts of testing as an individual, but I can't track my movement. I just can't do it. It doesn't exist. So that's why we're very much driven around that mission of that democratization of gait analytics.
Yeah,
very much driven about that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think a few years ago, I think I signed up for a beta. I think it was an Atlas or an Altis. It was a wristband that it was supposed to analyze the movements of the exercise and analyze whether you did it right or not. I never heard anything. I don't know if they ever went into
I
production.
think Atlas just sold to Peloton. So if it was Atlas,
Really?
they literally just got bought by Peloton, I think, last week.
Yeah, because I remember, because I thought it was great, but it was in the, it was in, I think it was
in the early phases. Yeah.
It wasn't even like, I didn't think they had an actual thing, but yeah, I was looking at it and I was like, wait, this is groundbreaking. If they come out with this is amazing.
Totally.
And it was supposed to, I think, it had a database with exercises. And if you did shoulder press, it would be aware of that. It would count your reps, it would put your sets in there and things of that sort. But yeah, no, you're right. I think that's great what you're doing, because nobody measures those things. And to your point, with the female, with the Q angles and everything else, it's also, you look at soccer. Oh, well, soccer players hurt their ACLs. Basketball players hurt the ACLs. Baseball players tear the UCL. No, it shouldn't be that way. It should be that way.
Exactly.
There is a way, I think, to play there's going to be injury, right? We can't prevent anything, but why not have the most data? And just to your point, why are we not? It's right there. It's not like ACLs happen in women's soccer more than men's because we have no idea. The information's right there. You can stick a sensor on 1,000 kids on a weekend tournament and analyze ground reaction force, why they do this, why they're cutting, and we can get so much stuff out of it. And it's like I said, it's an untapped resource. I think
when we think about that too, like, so we're in 5 NBA teams right now, 4 in the NFL, lots in Major League Baseball, lots of amateur pro. What I find interesting is I'll come into a team and I'll just ask them, like, have they done any testing on walking or running? And they're like, no. Sometimes they do force plate jump testing and they, have RSI or some modified RSI. What I find fascinating is that's a big selling point. It's like, guys, you should be getting a walk test on file, like you would be taking blood. So if someone is actually dealing with a hamstring and you get them to a walk test, like, that baseline data is shocking that we don't have it. And I'll just say, just imagine. So we've had some NBA teams that have now gone to baseline the entire team, which is fantastic. But it's like, yeah, everybody should get baseline testing. Single leg jump for distance, for height, walk test, run test. That should be just a standard of practice, whether you're taking it from Plantiga or some other method, but some other method is going to be expensive and you're going to have to go to a mocap lab. That should just be like standard care,
Absolutely. And I think it needs to be added. I have a question I just thought of a while. Have you guys found, obviously you probably have, but have you found decent correlations between somebody that at a base walking test has kind of a lot of, imbalances and then relationship to injuries they've had in the past?
100%. Yeah. So we're in the early days of even understanding asymmetries, but what we do find, so we've probably collected on over 3,500 people. Maybe about 2,000 of them have been athletes. People's healthy asymmetries, when they are healthy, is actually very tight across a number of things, like ground contact time, flight time, swing time. Most healthy people are within 10%. honestly. Like they're healthy, they don't report any problems, they feel great. It could be 5% on one walk and then 4% the next way. Like, and it's kind of in this healthy band. When you measure somebody and in a walk test, it comes out that they're like 14, 15, 16%. They might, like, you might ask them, hey, so like, what's up? They might say, well, I actually had a hamstring injury a couple of years ago. Like I felt like that's kind of still negative. And you can see the remnants of that in how they move. So no, we do have a good understanding of what healthy is as best as we can. But then what's interesting about asymmetries is you have learned adaptation. So there are some people that we will measure that have a high asymmetry and are perfectly healthy, that, from an injury when they were young or something. So asymmetries are also challenging because you have to not, detrain something that is actually natural. But at the same time, a lot of asymmetries, especially when they're like exaggerated, do resemble something that's off. It is basically like your suspension on a car. You don't, like, if that suspension's kind of off, it will kind of manifest into other things. And we see that often.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. And I think that's great that, you're able to do that, because that's where everything comes from, and again, going back to it, as our technology grows, coaches have to evolve. And I've always said, a lot of the mistakes you see in performance coaching is, I think it's a stop to technology, in that if you stay in your own thing with, I talk about all the time, a certain amount of weight makes you do this or that.
Yeah.
It stays you in a safe place, as opposed to now, if I'm a strength coach and I'm all about power output, West Side Barbell, but then I call you and you come and say, hey, all your athletes, they all walk wrong and we need to change this. I now have to learn a whole new group of technology exercises. I have to revamp my whole program now to change based on the analytics that you and your company have come up with. And I think that's a scary thing, right? I love seeing the technology, but I think that's our biggest roadblock between technology and having like iRobot as a performance industry, and some of the places where it's like Rocky IV. I think I think that one little stick, if you will, is the middle between us having these futuristic laboratories that we now call weight rooms, and some people that still lift like it's Rocky IV.
Yeah, you know what? And on that point too, I think like we have discovered that a lot of what we do with Plantiga is we also educate people on what some of these things mean, because they'll be like, do I even care? Like, who cares about ground contact time, asymmetry? Who cares about flight time? Like, why do I care? Talking about 40s, more so than a 40, it's not just like how many steps you get to top speed, but like what your ground contact time is at each stride. Like it can like you can work back and really start to understand. So I think that's a big one. What I also think too is I don't think technology is going to replace the practitioner. I think technology very much, and where we see ourselves in, is kind of being at the center of the experience, where the practitioner's at the center of the experience, and we're enabling that. So you can imagine like a very, like in the not too distant future, a strength coach should be able to monitor their population at home. So if they're training themselves, and that data should come back to them, and they should be able to use that data to have a conversation. And we feel with Plantiga that we're kind of enabling that experience, not getting rid of the practitioner at all. It's just enabling that practitioner, educating them on kind of how this data is important and how to implement it. That's kind of where we feel that we are right now. And we realize that in some groups that get us that don't use it a bunch, the education component is the missing piece. So once we teach them and do onboardings and data dives, then they start to use it a lot. Even some NCAA programs that like use it on 2 guys, you educate them more, they use it on 50 guys,
Yeah, no, I think education for everybody listening is the key, because it's not that these technologies don't work, and I don't think they don't want to use them, but if it's filled with a lot of big high-tech stuff and you don't understand it, you're not going to be more inclined. So I think it's great that with the technology comes the education. And I agree 100% with, in the future, we're going to still be that. We're going to be the ones to understand the technology and explain it to your athletes, kind of like a mission control at NASA, right? We're not in charge of, we're not sending, ships out to Mars or whatever without people, but we're still there to gauge emotions, right? Because technology will never be able to do that. We need to be emotions, trust. And I think it's we still need to have that trust. We need to have that practitioner there. But as a practitioner, as a performance coach, now I go to my athlete and say, look, here's what I want you to do. And that trust that I'm telling them what to do, and then they trust me and I'm not going to hurt them, will allow them to A, get better, but B, use more technology. Hey, I've tried X amount of this. I've tried this software. It's okay. Use this. And then we can take those numbers and we can explain it to our athletes to make an overall better experience. But I still think
100%.
exactly anybody that wants to try to get rid, you're never going to get rid of that human contact. I think that's a huge COVID thing. Training virtually is great. That's what I do now. But that human contact is there, especially in performance, because
has to be there.
Yep,
has to be there.
That
right?
trust has to be there.
Yeah. You know, in that too, like I really do feel like data as it develops, not just us, just data and sport performance and human performance in general, it really is just a part of the conversation. And I think the challenge is, how do you simplify it enough for someone to understand? Like, you know, a lot of also what it's doing is like Sherlock Holmes. You'll put them a program in place. You don't know if it's going to make them run faster. So you kind of need to deduce and measure, hey, is it working? And if it's not, you go back to the drawing board and you switch up their program and we try something else. All the data is like a check engine light. It's like giving you the diagnostics back on what's happening. And then you as the practitioner can kind of better tailor your program for their goal. And that human connection is never going anywhere. And in fact, I think tech, if we're thinking about it properly, just has to enable that. So we're actually making data-driven decisions, and it's based on like objective measures, which I think is kind of the key thing.
Yeah.
Nothing
absolutely.
like, there's been some studies to say that like a practitioner, this was, I think, a physical therapist, but their ability to determine a weak leg was as good as chance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like watching someone squat, as good as chance to determine what the weaker leg is, you know, like they don't really know. The eye is bad.
Yeah, no. And also I think the eye is a learned behavior, right? Because
totally,
if you take two people, this is extreme, but if I have you work in a facility for 10 years and you only teach squats that way, and you take somebody else and they teach squats a whole different way,
totally,
your eye and my eye are going to be different. Not that we learn the wrong way, because we both have the same amount of experience. You know, IQ test, you can do whatever you want, but if that's what you've seen and you've identified it as correct, any other way is going to be foreign or wrong. So I think that's another thing too. Not that it's bad or good, but it's also a learned behavior. Everybody, I think, especially in exercise, I'm sure you can agree, and some people that don't coach or train don't really understand, when your client or athlete perfectly squats or deadlifts for the first time, you're like a happy parent. You know, they do it and you're like, oh my God, it all worked. But that vision is in your head from the beginning. But I also think it's also how you're represented. And I think with the data, it's good because it acts as a control, right? Regardless, if my squat is this way and somebody else's is that way, and I see yours as crap and you see mine as terrible, but now you can come in the middle and say, yeah, but in terms of ground reaction force, shin angle, muscles working, you know, stressors and shear forces on the joint, they work the same or his is better. Now I'm out because the technology is there to figure it out. I have a question too I wanted to ask. In your opinion, how do you think we change this whole thing where, because I feel like it happens in baseball, the biggest, and the other sports are a little bit ahead, but how do we, because you're talking about understanding and the way to present things, how do we protect from, because I've seen it a lot, you come out with a new technology, right? Let's just say a catapult system. A team takes that technology, they implement it throughout their minor leagues, their professional, everything. What seems to happen, though, somewhere in the middle is the first year they're analyzing everything. They're getting numbers, they're getting data, they're making sure the players are healthy, the players are in the know, everybody's mixed in. The technologies really help, you know, push the performance. But somewhere along the line, and this could just be me, but I've noticed that we get caught on, or the higher ups get caught on one number. And instead of force plates determine, you know, time spent on the ground and how fast we can get to a certain speed, and that correlates to velo, somehow still get mixed up in, well, the more force that this guy produces on the force plate, the higher his velo is. And then we go backwards, and then we try to get the guys, you know, analytic numbers high because we think they directly correlate to velocity or running speed. How do you think we could change that? Do you think that's an educational thing, or?
That's such a good question. And I feel like we interact that with a lot of our customers is there's, you know, your front office, who are not scientists, but they're very smart in their own right. Then you have your kind of VP of performance and player health and that kind of interaction and kind of focusing in on some metrics. The thing is we just don't really know. Now, you can't say that to some, AGM, but
You're
that's
right.
the truth.
Yeah.
It's like, look, we don't know. And I think maybe just being more honest and transparent that, look, as good as data is, and we collect it for a living, the application of that data is literally where it's at. Like collecting data is one thing, fantastic. Lots of organizations do it. But then it's like, what do I do with that? And then not only what do I do with that, but then can I implement those strategies and actually get some outputs that actually matter, like winning more games or having better player availability or blah, blah, blah. So I don't know a single answer, but I think it would start with just a lot more damn transparency of like, people should just say, I don't know, way more often in this world. Because there's a lot of people that even I read that are like, I don't know how you're that confident. How do you say that with so much confidence when in fact the research says that there's like kind of two arguments and we don't really know. So I think it's just people need to be so much more honest with the fact that we're so early on. Like we can draw like face validation correlations, which I think we do a bunch and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think we really know a whole lot. And that's where I think like you have to be committed to data collection as a process that like to get longitudinal data off of like 1, 2, 3 years. I also find too with teams, they switch out performance staff sometimes like it's weather patterns. So how are you supposed to, and even if you have a player for 1 year, really you need like 2, 3, 4 years of data to really start kind of making sense of stuff, which is actually, we actually believe very, very strongly about going to the athlete more than ever. Athletes should own that data. They should collect it on themselves. It should be like bottoms up approach, not so much top down approach, because they need to be tracking that from when they're in high school. And then they can be way more informed and tell the performance staff or the GMs like what is working and what's not. So anyways, I digress. But yeah, I think ultimately transparency and way more, I don't know, or I think this might mean that, lots of I think, because we don't really know. Some stuff we do, but lots of stuff we don't.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I said, I wanted to get your opinion, but I think that's a great answer because it's almost like we operate we don't really know what we're doing, honestly. I mean, if you want to chalk it up, but we have to answer to people that want black and white answers right now, right? I mean, I've talked about it before. When you train a professional athlete, are you really making them better, or are you just keeping them at the area or the skill? Like the same thing is, and I've always, nothing against the guy, but like the guy that comes out and trained Michael Jordan. Oh, well, we changed his body from baseball to basketball. I'm like, it's Michael Jordan. Like the guy.
Hey, man, I heard that in the ESPN thing, and I was like, I don't know. I think Michael Jordan is one of the best athletes in human history, and he's unbelievable. And you could have had him going and being a professional golfer, and he would have done that too. Like,
But it was just, oh, well, his body was fully all baseball, so we had to. No, he played baseball, which is entirely lazy, and then he came back too early from basketball, and he hadn't ran in forever.
Too much load too soon. Yeah, exactly.
But I always think like, that's always the thing. It's, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. Like, and you brought up a great point. When I started doing baseball stuff, a lot of times in college, people are like, oh, did you know this would work? No, but I know it will now because I did it. And for a whole season, I did some stuff. Nobody died. We played better. So now I can say, hey, this works because I tried it. But you can't come. I think it's, as technology gets better and as we get better with our kind of the techniques we use, we don't know unless we use them, but you can't tell anybody that you don't know. And the people that answer to you, they all need hard evidence and they need exact translations. And I think that's the problem because it would be, if you were, I think the programs would be so much better, leaps and bounds. If I could go to a coach and say, do you have an idea? Yeah. Okay. Where'd you get this? Oh, well, this team does it. This guy does it. This guy does it. And all my education tells me this is going to work. I don't know if it's going to help at all, but all the things that I know and the people that I got it for, everything points to a yes, as opposed to, oh yeah, look, his squat numbers are And like I said, just like you talk about, and we don't know. It's same thing with baseball. Now you're explaining to people, front office, but they don't know what you're talking about. And I think it goes the other way. Then you have analytical guys yelling at you because some guys, glycogen level or his hamstrings off by points. I'm like, first of all, too much.
Come on.
We have to just say, I have no idea. And,
we're all trying our best. And it's like Sherlock Holmes. You have a magnifying glass and you're trying to uncover, and it's a level of discovery, and what works for a first baseman probably won't work for an outfielder, probably won't work for a pitcher, and they're all a little bit different. Not only are they different, like a term that we use at Plantiga a lot is N=1. Like, fuck, man, everybody is so unique that even what worked for one athlete might not work for the second athlete. So that is the individualized level that we're at. So you cannot make blanket statements across a position or a type of sport. It's like, no. If anything I've ever learned, it is unique to you, unique to me, unique to every single person, like our fingerprints, So,
and it's interesting too. It's almost like when you get these anomalies, right? Your Jordans, your Bo Jacksons, people try to deny it. Oh, Michael Jordan was terrible at baseball. Well, Michael Jordan batted .250 in AA.
He was not terrible at baseball at all.
You know how hard it is to bat 200 after not playing baseball for 15 years? That's people wouldn't even hit the ball if you didn't know what you're doing. Totally. Bo Jackson, yes, it's terrible what happened, but do you know how hard it is to play baseball and then just do some stretches and run for 200 yards on Monday Night Football? Like, when those people come up, it's always like, well, yeah, but this happened, or they should have did this, and it's just like, I think that the biggest thing is like what people should learn in this stuff with the data is appreciation. When a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan come along, appreciate just that they're athletic. Give them all the credit.
Totally.
The guy's the best basketball player ever, and then he just took 2 years off and went and hit 200 in professional baseball. I mean, that's unbelievable. But yeah, people are like, well, yeah, he didn't do as well, and he struck out a lot, and who cares? The guy played
lots
baseball.
of guys strike out a lot. That's baseball.
Exactly. And I think it's amazing and stuff like that. I want to get into, because we talked about before the show, and I love it, the stuff you're doing with the military and kind of how your technology almost seems like they're taking full advantage, and you're advancing everything in those realms.
And that kind of tees up from the last part. The thing about the military, which is amazing, is they are very much recognized that they don't know. So you could almost kind of categorize what we do in the military, quite frankly, as research. So they have a problem. Like, they don't know the type of load that these guys are under on combat missions, or they don't know how they move when they come in for basic training. So where we've kind of come in, we have a big contract with the Canadian Armed Forces, and we have some really good stuff with the US DOD and DARPA. And basically, to summarize them, is we're taking our system. A big thing is guys come in, they break them. So stress fractures, ACLs, like, it's crazy how many soldiers they break when they start to train. Too much, too soon. So what we've done is we've done some stuff around, can we do a walk, run, and jump test? And can we classify people who don't really run that fast and might have higher asymmetries and have a bad RSI and they don't jump that high? Can we categorize them at a higher risk for injury? And because of that, they should go in program A, medium risk or low risk. And the thing is we tell them in the military is great, is we don't really know. So we have to collect a bunch of data. We have to analyze it. One up here in Canada, which I think is really exciting, is we built an algorithm that can predict carriage load. So I carry a backpack with 100 pounds. We trained a model with machine learning and deep learning techniques where we can actually predict within 5 pounds how much weight someone's carrying in their backpack just by the way that they move their legs. So the kinematics of their lower limbs change. What we do with that algorithm is, if I know you're carrying 80 pounds, but our predictive algorithm says you're walking like people who are carrying 120 pounds, that means you're maladapted to carry that weight. Thus, you're at higher risk for injury because you're walking like it's way heavier than it is. So I think some of that work is the most exciting stuff because, again, you can put somebody through a 2-minute walk test weighing 80 pounds. And if on the flip side, if our algorithm says, look, they're walking like they're carrying 60 pounds, that means they're like really tough and that weight doesn't really affect them and how they move. So you can almost put them and train them a bit harder. Really what these kind of programs are about is their musculoskeletal injuries and the cost associated with treating them, stress fractures, the knee injury itself with the US and the Canadian, like it's crazy the amount of ACLs and MCLs, like it's just brutal. So our work is really around like screening, baselining, using that data in rehab or return to combat, and then kind of, again, like, can we try to assess at risk or high risk? And then some stuff that we're trying to apply for now is, can we actually try to predict performance output? Now that is like if, because that is such a challenging problem, but can we see some stuff to try to show what Marine might actually make it through? Because again, lots of guys kind of bounce out. That process is really expensive. So that's kind of in a nutshell, but it's really exciting. And that same type of stuff, even with like the load carriage prediction stuff, is you can apply that to firefighters, anybody that carries heavy loads, even policemen, anybody in that tactical realm. Are they maladapted to carry that weight? If they are, they're likely going to be at higher risk for hurting themselves. So it's really exciting, and something that it's probably our largest contracts, quite frankly. Like, they pay very well, the militaries, and they know it's research, and it's from the basis of, we don't fucking know, so let's figure it out. Right? Like, all we have is, we have a data collection platform that's validated in our metrics. It's awesome. It's unobtrusive. You can put it in combat boots. You can put it in everywhere. And now we have a lab in the field, and now they want to just collect data. Like, let's see what's there. Step one is collect, right? Step two is analyze. Step three is implement. So that's kind of, we're in kind of step one, step two right now.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Like I said, the stuff with the load, and just to your, your point, I was actually listening to Joe Rogan the other day, and they were talking to Marcus Luttrell, and he said, the biggest thing that separates them, they're not afraid to say, I don't know. They said in the middle, it's a big deal. I know from, certain stories and different people, but
yeah,
if you don't know something, you have to say, I don't. If you try to act like you know what you're doing and you screw up, you get kicked out.
You get like kicked out. They hate that.
Yeah. So I think that's very interesting, what we were just talking about, that ability to say, I don't know. Now, on the flip side, for everybody watching, you're supposed to, I don't know, then go figure it out right away and come back in a few hours. But the point is that if you don't know something, you are highly instructed to say, I don't know. If you're navigating through the woods and you don't know, there's no getting yelled at you. It's a very big deal for you not to, to not admit that you know. If you try to, fabricate, it's a very big deal. I do know that because they're talking about that.
Hubris is not hubris means like kind of overconfidence. That is not a trait that they like.
Nope.
You know.
I went to Altis a few years ago with Dan Path, and we
were
talking about the Special Forces, the Russian Special Forces, the Navy SEALs, and one of the great things that he brought up. I mean, Dan Path's amazing. Hear him speak. He can, stand in front of somebody running and tell you what's wrong with them, and he doesn't even
totally
wild. But in the story, he was talking about, and I always found this to be fascinating and very interesting. What they look for in the performance tests is they score high on empathy and caring for others, is what they, not rage and aggression and craziness.
Totally.
SEALs, all the hard asses, if you will, they score in like the 95 percentile of empathy and understanding.
Of empathy. Yeah. We've done some work with Stu and Altus. They have a kit. They're a fantastic group who are doing some amazing work.
Yeah, no, they're great people. I mean, I went out there, anybody out there listening, if you're looking for an internship, somewhere to learn, obviously, but go out there. I mean, I was there for it was amazing. I mean, everything that it's almost like everything that they do, we talked about that relief with the squat. Everything they do is like correct. Everything that you do, you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Oh, right. They analyze load. They change running surfaces. There's a guy there to fix stuff. The weight room isn't insane. It works with whatever they're doing. It's just one of those places. I guess it's like a safe space, because everything that goes on, you're like, okay, they're really starting to, they're doing everything correct, makes you feel good. Not that everybody's wrong, but.
Our head of performance and science, a guy named Dr. Matt Jordan, him and Stu McMillan, who's also one of the founders of all this, are very close.
When I was there, I think does he have a beard?
He does, yeah, like a big white beard, tall guy.
Tall guy. He was like barefoot. He had like Lululemon pants on, but he's brilliant.
Yep.
That's definitely. Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we kind of got connected through. We're into that school through Stu and through kind of our VP of performance, Matt. That's another thing that you actually find about this world, is it's crazy small. Like there's really not, like if you take baseball, even if you go NCAA Div 1, Div 2, professional sports, and you actually like put everyone, athletic trainers, strength coaches, sports, it's really like maybe what, 500-600 people. It's not a big population. It's very small. It's also why you need to be just generally a good person, because the world is tiny, especially in the world of sport, especially in, you know, the US, Canada. It's just not big.
Absolutely. I mean, just to look at it right now, right? We connected through Instagram a few days ago, but I talked to Levels 2 weeks ago. And
I spoke to Levels a month ago, you know, like it's a small world.
I went to Altus, you know, the same guys. I mean, it's crazy, you know. I mean, we were just talking about that. I coached a kid who lives in Vancouver Island, but
totally
anybody, you know, we'll get through the, you know, some of the stuff later about future, but if you're listening, and I'll be the first to tell you, networking and just being a good person is what allows me to have all these amazing conversations, because I will say everybody that I bought it, they know somebody from someplace that I went to school with. I mean, it's wild. I mean, I've interviewed people that are in, like me, you live in Canada, right? And you do analytical stuff, and we've, you know, 2, 3, 4 people that I do. You know, I think that one of the takeaways, you know, just right here while we're on it is, if you're listening in this and if you want to get involved in this, or how do you talk to people, send them messages and stuff, but like everybody's connected. So it's very good not to like piss people off, or, you know, be very judgmental of people's things on Instagram with social media. Everybody's connected. I mean, I've told stories before. There has been times where I was standing in the field in the minor leagues, and a kid would run up to me on the other team, and I coached him in summer ball 7 years ago. And to be honest, everybody out there, he wasn't any good. My first thought was, as he embraced me, how did you get drafted?
How did you get here?
Terrible 6 years ago. I didn't say that, but like, you know, just those things. It's such a small world. You know, I mean, you talked about the numbers, you know, look at baseball. You know, I used to look at it when I was there, you know, for the money we get, there's only 350 strength coaches in baseball. I mean, now they have performance, but that's not a lot of people. You know, rugby, you know, with your stuff, you know, there is a lot of analytics, but there's not a ton of companies that are out there doing the same thing, you know,
like most teams, like we've worked with some baseball teams that don't even really have an applied sports science degree. Like that's kind of a new thing. And, you know, like we work with an NBA team, they have one sports scientist. That's it. One that tries to make sense of the data. So it's just really not a big world.
Yeah. And like I said, it's always foreign to me that years ago, 10, 11 years ago, the Knicks were wearing wearable things, but we haven't gone anywhere from that. You know, I remember hearing stories in college. Oh yeah, they used to wear a thing, and on it you could tell what, you know, Quentin Richardson's blood pressure was and stuff. But I'm like, where is this going? We just stayed with that for 12 years. You know, I think it's either, you know, you notice something, and I'm sure, you know, all the people that you've been in front of and everything, you have to want to grow every day, unless you're going to be lost, because it constantly grows all the time. The technology explodes. The weightlifting, though, it doesn't, because everywhere we always go really far out with technology, and then we end up with doing what the East Germans and the Russians did in 1960, right? Everybody tries to use all this wild stuff, and it's all these crazy things and these brand new ideas, and you hook yourself up to wires, and at the end of the day, you guys come out, technology comes in, and they look, just lift heavy, this is what happens, you know. And to touch on that, I think it's great too, what you were talking about with that ability perceived exertion. I think that people don't realize that everything is about efficiency, right? We were talking about this before. You're training to do something. So in the military, if I'm carrying a 200-pound rucksack and it feels like 100, I'm good. I'm in good shape. I have good bone density. But if I'm carrying 60 pounds and it feels like I'm carrying a piano, we have a problem. You know, and I think that we talked about that, not wanting to say I don't know, and also people don't like simple answers. If I came up to you and said, look, you're at risk to hurt your ACLs because when you carry your book bag, it's like you're carrying a Jeep, and your friend over there, it's like he's carrying nothing. People want more, but how? I think
it's like, exactly. I'm just telling you that's what it is. So now we need to figure out a program to correct, like you need to train up your deficit. You know, I think you need to do more squats. You need to like get stronger there, kid, because you're not strong enough, quite frankly.
I think there's in this, you know, an opinion, but I think there's, if you only, we talked about this before with bandwidth, if you only give somebody one thing to work on, they have to work on that or fail. And I think it's, you know, you see it a lot of times, right? Nothing against yoga, but yoga teachers, what do? A lot of them, they stretch all the time. Why? They're good at stretching. They don't go in the squat rack and try to squat 305. It's because it's a pattern. And I think instead of saying, look, you need to be better at squatting, and that's it, right? Let's work on that for 3-4 weeks or 5 weeks.
Totally.
It's give me, I want 35 things to work on. So now if I don't feel like doing these things, I can go to this other bag of stuff, as opposed to me just saying, look, man, this is what you want to do, right? Your gate's messed up, fix that. Instead,
Totally.
they want a list of stuff so they don't feel like doing that. They can come back to here. I think that is our
I
biggest
could
thing
not agree
because,
more.
yeah,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
want, I mean, not that we're in a complainy generation. It's instead of saying you need to learn how to dribble with your left hand, it's so what do I do? Well, you're going to go home for 6 months to dribble your left hand. But instead it's, well, I want to learn to do 360s and I can't dunk as good yet. It's all nonsense. If people would
just dribble better with your left hand. Trust me, just start with that.
Exactly.
You know, we find like we help a lot of organizations and athletes out individually, and they kind of ask us for coaching. Now, in fact, it is kind of coaching, but we call it more recommendations. So it's more like, look, we're seeing this and this is what it might mean. So you might want to do that. And we're very particular in choosing those words because we don't really know. And it is a recommendation. It's like, look, I've only collected on 3,000 people. I say only, that's amazing for us, but it is also a small amount of people. So how can I make a broad sweeping, like this means this? But you have high asymmetries, man, which are actually quite high. Like, are you okay? Starts a conversation. It's like, okay, well, it might mean this. Like, it might mean that you have a deficit that we need to work on. So you need to do more single leg, squats and jumps. And, like you got to work out that one leg, but like that might fix it. Might think like we recommend. It's not like you need to go do these sets and these reps. It's like, well, do you? I don't know. So
yeah, I think it's, you talk about it. I've talked about communication. It's all about, Jordan Peterson again, right? Say what you mean.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Communication's everything.
Say what you mean and be truthful. And I think that's a big deal because I would rather a coach be like, look, man, I don't know, but I think there's a misconception is right. Cause everything is all about how things used to be or perception, right? We talk about reality's perception.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that strength coaches, egotistical, pound your chest and we can get through everything like war. Where in reality, I think we need to be honest, but if I know that, your knee injury is not going to be that great, I'm not gonna be sympathetic and be there and tell you it's all over. You have to provide that
of course
at the end of the tunnel. But I also think you have to be there too you have to provide information where you have to be a realist also, because you get a lot of people like, oh, no problem, we can get through that, no big deal. When sometimes we have to be real. I don't know. I've never seen this before. Or this is bad. You might never throw again. These are the things we have to analyze because it would make things a lot easier because you see it on both ends. One is, oh, well, this person told me I'd never play again, so they quit and they're done. Yeah. Or you have the other one where it's, you told me that I would be this way, or you said that my velo would be this and it's not, and now it's your fault. Instead of
totally.
I think that communication and the stuff is huge, and what we've talked about over the last hour and change is communication. I think it's what that, with your brain, what you're saying and you is communication.
And even how we get some customers is like, they'll come back to us, let's say a basketball team just renewed for the beginning of their third year. And it's, they come back to us often with some of the best players in the NBA. Can't say their names, but, they make $40 million a year. And they're saying, so, like, what does this mean? Like honestly, man, like, we're doing our best. We don't see him. Sure, he has a little high asymmetries. You might want to go and talk to him because that does seem like a pretty big change. It's like outside of kind of like our like expected change. So it kind of starts a conversation. But again, it's like the managing the expectations, clear talking. Yeah, I think that's big. Also, too, so back to your comment about like telling an athlete that they're never going to play again. If someone says that to you, even if that might be the truth, no one should ever fucking say that to you. They should say, look, your injury is really fucking bad. And if you are going to play again, I don't even know, man. It's going to take so much work. And I'm happy to be there and we're going to work and we're going to do it. It might happen, it might not, but nobody should ever be categorical. Like, I think the negativity around in this world is insane because you should never tell somebody they're not going to, even if they might not play again. You have to say that it's really bad and they might not play again, but they also might. It's up to them,
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I did negativity. I think that is, just good, but that's the worst part. I mean, you have strength coaches that, they hide their information because everybody thinks they have the holy grail of training, and so they don't want to answer questions. And then if you put yourself out there, there's always somebody that tears it down. But then on both ends, one person gets mad and the other person thinks they're right. And I think that that's our whole problem with things. And then somebody like you comes in with hard numbers and say, well, actually, he is right, and it causes a whole big thing
Totally.
where if we would just say, okay, we're all wrong, but he's got a better idea because he's using computers and science and things that are way out of my realm. And according to his technology, that's working. So we're going to do that. And I think that's where people should be after an answer instead of people want, you've seen it at a coaching conference. I always think it's hilarious. It happens to me every once in a while. You go to a coaching conference, right? And it's
Yeah.
700 coaches and then you. And they all ask, what type of band? What day do I put this exercise in? How many do I do? How tall is the pit? All these generic, like cookie cutter exercises, right? And then you ask a question that's high level and the people get mad, right? But I think that
Totally.
it's a misunderstanding of a question, but it's also like we should be closer with the coaches, right? They should all
Everybody should
understand.
just, yeah, everybody should know, especially in the world of sports. I see this on Twitter between like different people in
Yeah.
sprinting or strength coach or whatever. It's like, guys, everybody is trying to figure it out. We're
Mhm.
all trying our best. If people should just be more like comrades, like, yo, man, like, cool. You think that, I think something kind of different. I don't know you. I don't know your clients or your athletes. Like, people need to be way more, less aggressive. It's not so combative.
Yeah.
Like, we're all trying to do a good job here. So I
Yeah.
feel like I see some like back and forths on Twitter and I have to put my phone down. I'm like, oh my God, so negative. People just
Yeah.
getting so worked up. Like, everyone just
Absolutely.
needs to relax a little bit, you know?
Yeah, and then you have the stuff with people. People, it's a lot of people take credit for genetics. We just bring up track. Oh
Yeah.
well, but I train. Usain Bolt ran a 9.56. The guy's 6'7". Like was born in Jamaica. Like there's all that with his ratio between hamstring and quad is
He
75 to
actually
like
has high
25.
asymmetries.
It's got
He has
yeah,
high asymmetries, which is not normal, but
yeah,
somehow for him, he's the best runner in the world in
yeah.
history, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. But he comes
yeah,
out of the box sideways because he
yeah,
generates
yeah,
so much power. People don't know that he was in the Olympics at 16, but he wasn't any good because he was too small, or sorry, he wasn't strong enough to keep his torso taut. But the point of it is, you didn't train him to be fast. He was fast. And then, you did some stuff.
totally.
I think that's another, oh, well, he trained Kobe Bryant or he trained Michael Jordan. And it's kind of like, no, you didn't. That's genetics, right? And I think that the people keep trying to replace genetics with performance, and then they use not you, but technology as a
Yeah,
scapegoat. Oh, well, Justin Verlander scored this on a force plate and he threw 101 until he was 35. And I'm like, and you see, I think that's where we get stuck instead of saying,
totally.
well, Justin Verlander's a freak. The technology tells us what he's able to do that may or may not recruit to what he does on the field. But if I can take the data and get somebody who's not well known or whatever to produce the same amount of numbers across the board, because I hate when it's one exercise, we might be
Totally.
able to get him to have the same force output or performance as Justin Verlander. But understand that Justin Verlander is Justin Verlander for a reason. And he's the only person that truly has true spin. And he's the only one of the only pitcher in history. He gets stronger as the game goes on. That was always his thing. But I
We
think
just don't know the why
yep,
sometimes.
exactly.
It's almost like a human fallacy. We always try to figure out why, but we just don't know.
Mhm.
Like lots of times we don't know why. So, it's like false correlations. If it every morning when the sun comes up and the cock crows, people would be like, well, that rooster is the reason why the sun comes up. No, it just happens at the same time. The sun could come up
Yeah.
whether that rooster crows or not, but like people will they'll hear the rooster and it's like, well, we don't really know that, like you can't. So,
Hold on 1 second. Start with rooster. So you froze right
oh,
after
gotcha.
rooster and sun, and
Okay.
then
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
cut out, and then I hit pause, and then there you go. Okay.
Okay. So it's kind of like when the sun comes up and the rooster crows, we think, well, maybe the rooster makes the sun come up. That would be an easy thing to think. Well, no, because if the rooster crows or not, the sun's going to come up. So they might happen at the same time every day. They might be correlated, but they're really not connected, right? So like we do that a lot in performance. We're like, well, this means this. Well, do we know that? I don't know. Might just happen at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know.
Right.
I think like we've been talking about it. I think it's more, we have to learn to say, I don't know. I just wanted to ask, like, just for future stuff with what you guys are doing, are you going to go more with like team setting and software, or are you eventually going to do it where I can go to like a website, buy one just for myself and analyze what's kind of the, if you can answer that, what's
Of
kind of
course
the
I can.
direction,
No.
where you're going to go, or where do you see yourself, both maybe, just curious. Cause like I said, the technology is great. If, like I said, we'll talk about it a little bit more after, but.
Yeah. So, we have spent the last 3 years in professional sport, NCAA, military, hospitals, performance centers. All of that has actually been part of the plan. So we wanted to take kind of elite technology that's used in athletes, talking about that trickle down effect, and actually bring it to the individual athlete and even the individual, like a walking mom. So what we're doing actually this year is we're starting a beta program. So if people want to go to plantiga.com/beta, they can sign up, but we're actually going to bring the same. So our hardware, our analytics, but also one-on-one coaching with some of our movement specialists. And we have 4 or 5 on staff, being able to actually offer that to individual athletes. So the same stuff that we're doing for, athletes on this NBA team, but bringing that to the individual. So that could be a runner or someone doing CrossFit. We're kind of focusing on athletes, but ultimately it's anybody that understands that they just want to boost their longevity. They want to, recover faster from an ACL or an MCL or a hamstring, or they just want to perform at an optimum level. So our goal is, again, that democratization of gait analytics and the value of that. So this year we're starting a beta program with very limited spots. And that's up and running right now. So kind of we track a couple in the NHL, individual athletes. We track a couple in the NBA. We track some guys overseas. But really, we're excited about that. So no, the future is the individual, and probably next year you're going to be able to come and buy individually. And then we're going to still continue to sell to practitioners. And quite frankly, we have kind of a research arm of our business that is growing. Like we just sold into a pretty big Australian university for a bunch of military research as well. So research, practitioners, and then individuals.
Yeah, that's awesome. Australia is a great place for that. But like I said, I'm happy to see that that's going up there. But I think it's great that the technology, they start off in professional, but then it's coming down to where the normal person can understand it. Because I think that's 100%. where we need stuff, right? LeBron James doesn't really need to know whether he puts pressure on his outside or inside of his foot, but it's good to have the data. But a normal person that has foot problems, say there's a nurse or something like that, that's where we really find, the helpful with these technologies.
Totally. And like we're simplifying that to like a movement health score. So that kind of same algorithm that I was talking about around load carriage, being able to just quantify. So another thing that we did is we collected on a number of ACL patients, and we built a model and a 5-point score that can basically grade, does your limb move like it is injured or it is healthy? And can we track that to see on a rehab where you're ahead of schedule, behind schedule, or kind of on par? So right now, if you score a 1 on a walk test, that means your limb literally looks like a 2-week post-op ACL. If you score a 5, that means your limb looks like other limbs in our database that are super healthy. If you score a 3, that means your limb kind of looks like an injured limb, kind of looks like a healthy limb. Now, we have people who've had an ACL 5 years ago that will record a 3. So their patterns are still, they haven't fully recovered. So I think bringing it down to some simple metrics on their movement health, on their speed, on their RSI, giving that kind of power and the kind of simplicity in that in a mobile app with the actual kind of sensors, that's what we're going to bring to the individual over this year and next year. Whereas in a practitioner at a seeing like tons of metrics, and they're kind of diving deep. So that's kind of how we're going to splinter the platform kind of over the next 12 months.
Awesome. And is that something too, you talked about ACL a lot. can eventually, or will it be, go towards like if somebody gets a hip replacement, ankle injury?
100%. Oh, 100%. And so we've done a lot on the knee joint just because of the military contract, and that was kind of a big focus. We've actually collected a ton on ankle injuries as well. So we are embedded in a couple of physical therapy, sports med clinics. The benefit of that is our ability to tag and label tons of high quality data on back injuries, hip replacement. So that will be a part of the platform. So anybody that is dealing with any type of lower body, musculoskeletal issue, you can track that with real data that will grade the kind of quality of that movement. And I put quality in quotes because it's really hard to determine quality or variability, but we actually are making some really good strides, pun intended, towards that. So
yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's groundbreaking for injuries. You could have somebody
100%.
have surgery, they come back, and now you have the numbers. Oh, I feel great. Yeah, but your gate's trash, right?
Totally.
That's what we'll be. And we all, I don't think we'll run into, because you've seen it all the time. People get in, people are fine and they get surgeries, especially for those. I think the just an opinion, but the great thing that you guys are doing is that you're taking something that has always been a problem, because if you break your foot, right, if you get ingrown toenails, let's just say, it affects everything, because we can't just go walk on your hands, right? And I think that's another thing that's not as talked about, because if you break your thumb, right, you break your wrist, I don't need to use my right hand, figuratively speaking. But if you break a foot, an ankle, jam a toe, something happens, you still have to use these things, right? And I always look at, and I'm sure you've seen it before, those scooters, right? Instead of being on crutches now, people use those scooters, and I'm like, those are terrible for your hips. Now we're walking around with a hip hike, and like I cringe when I look at rehab stuff, because I'm like, we have to make it somehow better so they can live. Like, you can't roll around on a scooter for 8 months. Crutches are terrible. I think the best thing probably is the walking boot, because it takes the pressure off, and
walking boots are great. Plus, you're actually walking, and in fact, Plantiga comes from the word plantigrade. Plantigrade means a mammal that puts their toes and the metatarsals flat on the ground. There's very few mammals in the world that are plantigrade. Bears, humans, then you go down to like mice actually can go like this, but that's where Plantiga comes from, the word plantigrade, like basically a bipedal person or mammal standing up with their feet flat on the ground, because it's so critical. Like, movement and mobility is everything. And in fact, talking about our beta program, I do think very soon here, athletes are fine, but like anybody, someone that's just a health enthusiast that is dealing with, knee osteoarthritis, heck, fuck, man, we've even done some work with Parkinson's, like just being able to track mobility and asymmetries and gait speed with people that have Parkinson's, like just walking alone might be one of the best lenses into your health. So just like people kind of track their 10,000 steps, I think in like a year or two, people that are 70 are going to be wearing Plantiga. And if they leave the house and they're not wearing them, like, does my walk count if I didn't track it? Like, people are going to want to be able to track every time they go out and walk. And I think that world's happening whether we do it or not. And I'm kind of working hard where we're the de facto kind of group that does that. But yeah, man, it's literally for everybody. It's not just for athletes.
Absolutely. And I think the way that the technology should be integrated with coaching is that find out the answers you want, and then get the piece of equipment that helps for what you want to do. Right.
100%.
I think, the new course, so you'll see a lot of people, their athletes are wired up, outlets. You have to find out what you want too, right? So if you're going to use a catapult to track, say, right, people sleep like crap, go buy an Oura ring, right? You want to test ACL injuries, buy yours. But I also think once something like this, this is available to everybody, then people will be able to realize that we can track these things. And now it's going to be a point where, okay, what do I specialize in? Okay, leg drive, leg development. I buy this technology. I think that's the next step that we need to go through, so that you don't have guys with 40,000 things wired up to them going to play second base in the big leagues, right? I think it's important to say, okay, what do we want to find out today, or what are we going to do this year? And I think just, with the wearables and the way yours works, it's an ability to, they don't know they're wearing it. I think that's the hard, even
that's amazing, unobtrusive, abilities.
Yeah, like
the thing about catapults and connexons or things like that, like they're fantastic, but it just like the thing about footwear and why we do well in military settings is just unobtrusive. You can't feel it. We've also partnered with footwear manufacturers to embed the pod in the sock liner of the shoe. We've partnered with orthotics manufacturers where for some of our NBA clients, we literally get sent the orthotic from the player. We retrofit it to actually hold the actual sensor there. And you just can't feel it. So, like, do you know what the Hawthorne effect is? So if we're tracking someone, they change the way that they move, right?
Mhm.
Like if I know that I'm being tested for gait or jump or something, I don't really move naturally. So you need to literally go into the real world or basically have somebody not aware that they're being tracked. That's where I think our value proposition really comes in is it's unobtrusive, it's anywhere, anytime, passive, it just collects that data. And then either in the moment, so right now it's not real time, there's no wireless on there, but like very soon probably it'll be like telling you stuff as it's happening, for you to act on. So
okay. So the current phase is you put it in there, it collects the data, and then you take it out and put it somewhere else, and then that's when you get the gotcha.
Yeah, totally. And also too, like back to that practitioner, I think practitioners are critical to our strategy and in general. So we see a world very soon here where we work with some running clinics or running physical therapy groups. They right now are asking us to be able to send their patients home with Plantiga so the patient can track every time that they run, and that COVID pandemic remote monitoring world will be in that phase of like 4 or 5 months. Even pro teams are asking us about, hey, can I send some of my guys home after the season to basically collect this stuff by themselves at home? And I feel like that's kind of where this world is kind of going, and we're kind of well positioned to take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna, as you're talking, bring up the I didn't know it's called the Hawthorne method. Now I know, but the stuff with ACL braces and things in weight rooms, and why if somebody has an ACL problem, we wear a brace. Why? It's a closed skin.
Right.
It's closed.
Totally.
Right? And you're gonna move unnaturally. Why do I want to promote you moving crappy or the way
Totally.
you're gonna move anyway? In here, and I think that's a big deal. I mean, I've gotten arguments with trainers back in the day, but I've never understood that. Right? In the game, I get it. Right? Things are happening. You're not thinking. We need that for protection. But in a weight room, the odds of you tearing your ACL, I mean, if I
very low,
coach, I should go find another job. I mean, it's
totally 100%, man. I cannot agree more.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask. Usually, towards the end, I do what's your advice for people in the field? But I'd like to get at your advice. What is your advice for somebody who wants to be involved in performance but wants to go the analytical route? What would you give them as a piece of advice to kind of start off and where to start?
So if they're in academia, I think the best thing that you could do is just start collecting data. So whether that's force plate data or heart rate data, like the best thing to do is just start collecting it. And you'll start to see your own variabilities with your own clients. That's just a big thing. I think just jumping in, pun intended, but like just jump in. In fact, we're just about to set up a little bit of a program where if people want to do research in like a postdoc, PhD, master's, they can apply and we'll give them our product and our platform and our service and support for free to support them in that research. So I feel like it's just important for anybody that wants to dive in is just to start doing it, doing. Quickest way to learn is just to jump in and not overthink it. So if you want to jump in, do it. Email me, start some research, just do it. Figure out a question and jump in. Life is short. We only live really 25,000 days is the average lifespan. So if you think you're growing up for 8,000 or 9,000, your final years are 8,000 or 9,000, you got like 10,000 days in the middle of your life to fucking do shit. So dive in.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Same thing. Dive in. You want to do something, especially now. I think that, we talk about it over because it's always there, but COVID should, in my opinion, taught you, if you want to do something, go do it
Totally.
Because no job is safe. No career is safe because of things this way. So why not either, fail, I guess this is negative, but why not fail at what you want to do, right? Jim Carrey says, you might as well try and then fail at something you want to do than fail at something that you hate. And I think that rings bigger and bigger. Fellow Canadian, see, look, I didn't even do that on purpose. And like I said, and like being able to just whatever you want to do. You want to collect data, get involved.
Just go do it. If you want to research, read.
Yep.
If you want to start a podcast, just do it. Just do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think. Listen, Nike hit it on the head. I think that's the best advice. just do it. Don't worry about stuff. And I think a lot of it too is don't overthink it. Just as long as you have the gift to do it, right? If you have a pod with me, I talk. So podcast, right? If you're interested and you have set things that separate, just go do it, right? I mean, obviously, if you're not if you're shy and you don't know how to talk to people, being a coach, you might have to do some other things. But
totally,
in terms of that, I think it's just important to do that.
But then go take a public speaking course. Just do it. It doesn't matter your skills. Like, I know this because I've done a bunch of hiring and we have a team. The biggest skill that I see in my team members, people that we hire, is just the ability to do. Execute, don't overthink. No one knows what the fuck they're doing. Just do it, And I just love that quality. I feel like we have a pretty amazing team. But don't even ask me sometimes. Just go do it, So even if someone wanted to start and just think about sports science, man, take your Apple Watch if you have one and just go do stuff and start tracking that data in an Excel spreadsheet on Google Docs and just see what happens. See what happens with your heart rate and the amount of but it's calorie counter or whatever. It's so bad. Anyways, but still, just do it. Start it.
Absolutely. So for anybody that wants to reach out to you, has more questions about the technology, where's the best place to reach you? And just, when I do the promotion on Instagram for the podcast in a few weeks, I will put your Instagram heading and all your stuff on there. But is there any other place?
Anybody, I'm open with my email. So anybody, if they want to contact me, it's Quin Sandler at Plantiga.com. Like Adam Sandler, Quin Sandler at Plantiga.com. Anybody that's interested in joining our beta program. So we're keeping it tight, but anybody that kind of signs up, we'll give them kind of early access when we launch kind of in the next probably 6-7 months. Plantiga.com/beta. And that program is pretty powerful because you'll get the actual sensors. But what I think is really important is you actually get that human interaction through chatting in the app and an onboarding session, depending on what your goal is, to help you attain that goal. And we're very excited about our beta program because, again, we have pro teams and research and clinics, but this is our first foray into the individual. So anybody that's interested in joining, I would love for them to sign up.
All right. Absolutely. Well, Quin, it was great. I love the conversation. I love the technology, man. I can't wait till it comes out, and hopefully
you'll be in the beta. Just sign up, and we're going to get you going. Okay.
Awesome, man. I can't wait.
Okay. Thanks, man.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Strength Coach Experience for all the latest updates on the podcast, as well as upcoming episodes. Thank you.